Ms. Sweetnam, I just want to pick up right where Mr. Stauber left off. Not to mention the fact that China uses child labor to mine these critical rare earth minerals. But let's look at China. China processes nearly 90% of the global rare earth. I think you were alluding to that a few minutes ago. 60% of production and 83% of processing, and China is the primary import source for 50 critical minerals here in the U.S., the primary processing source. So given that China's dominance in the extraction, process, and refining of these critical minerals that are essential to the manufacture of wind and solar equipment, what are those energy risks that Mr. Stauber was talking about that created by accelerating our reliance on this renewable energy?
So it's truly economic risk because China, with such a large position in these minerals, can decide what price they'll sell them at, and they can cut off customers. So if in the U.S. we have manufacturers who are depending on those materials, they can easily be cut off or the price can be raised. And because they have so much more market power than OPEC did, similar to the effects of the Arab oil embargo and the Iranian oil crisis when we saw prices skyrocket, cutting off those materials would also have that effect. I think if I may, I'd also like to point about, we hear very much about how the renewable energy is clean, the wind and solar, but in fact what you're doing is you're not eliminating emissions, you're exporting emissions, because the mining and processing and manufacturing of those strategic critical minerals for the renewable technologies are being produced with coal energy in China. So the emissions, as you'll see, the emissions of the world are continuing to go up. So even though it's correct that we've seen a lot more installation of renewable energy, CO2 emissions are not going down. And the reason they're not going down is that the developed countries are exporting their emissions to the developing world in China. And that deindustrialization that we're observing in Germany, the deindustrialization is also happening in Japan because of high energy costs. And so hopefully we'll not do the same thing in the United States.
You're right. As a matter of fact, China's opening up numerous coal plants every week. So we are just exporting emissions. And the fact that China has made no bones about it, they want to be dominant by 2045 in every category from economic to military. And so we need to, we've got to get our processing and our own refining and our mining back to America. Mr. Jensen, I want to thank you for testifying today. I want to talk to you about the energy costs for Georgia families. In your written testimony, you talk about the price reductions and say that Georgia household of 3 in 2025 with a 10% price decline will save $763. With a 50% reduction, Georgia families could save $3,800. Can you tell me what is needed for Georgia families to be able to save this money?
Yes, thank you for the question, and I will tell you, but first I'll note that those numbers you just cited, that's only the direct costs. And so when you take into account the indirect costs associated with energy prices, those numbers could be 2 to 3 times as high savings for Georgia families. And for that to happen, there needs to be an all-of-the-above energy strategy in the United States to increase every stage of energy production. And we've seen this administration start to implement that strategy through executive order. But if we want that to be as successful as possible and to be lasting, then the way to do it is through legislation as well.
Well, expand on it. Why is the cost of energy so high that families could save anywhere from $700 to $3,800 depending on that price reduction?
We've seen for this previous administration a severe constraint on the types of energy sources that are most widely used: natural gas, oil, and we've seen those constrained for the last 4 years, driving up prices. And so now if we, and we've also seen other kinds of energy like nuclear constrained. And so if we start to unconstrain America's potential to produce these resources, then we can snap up and start to see a dramatic increase in production. The United States I've been poking around these data recently, we're huge in these energy markets, and so we actually govern the global price of energy, and if we produce more, we can influence the price of energy both in the United States and at a global level.
Thank you. I see my time has expired. I tell you what, I think we're going to go with the second round of questioning, and the chair now recognizes